Do everything you can to not interact with stuff that you don't want to be made more popular. Because it isn't about, gee, they agree or disagree. It's about engagement. It's about whether or not there's somebody actually interacting with that page.
Welcome to the East Anchorage Book Club podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Gray. Today on the show, longtime Anchorage political strategist, Wigi Tozzi, discussing ways that volunteers can best assist a political campaign, including, as you heard in that opening clip, with social media. Welcome. I would love to get started by just having you tell us a little bit about your background.
Okay. Normally I wouldn't start here, but it is kind of important. I was born in Washington, D.C., and lived in that area for 25 years. Grew up in Montgomery County, Maryland, with the sons and daughters of senators and Congress people. So I've always been kind of aware and engaged in politics. Jump ahead to 2012, I guess it was 2012. I owned a tour company, and I was sitting at my computer, much like I am right now. And I had the TV, local news on in the background. And I heard this story about how my legislator had decided, this is between the election and the opening of the session, my legislator had decided that she was going to switch parties and become a Republican. And I was so angry and so blinded, I could not see straight. And I owned a tour company at the time, and I was trying to stay out of politics, even though I was engaged, personally, and I just couldn't stay out of it. So me and a bunch of friends put together a recall campaign for Lindsay Holmes, which we did for almost 2 years, went all the way up to the filing deadline in 2014. And in the process, I ended up being district chair for the Democratic Party and stuff like that. And I volunteered on a bunch of campaigns. In 2020, back in 1994, I managed a campaign up in Fairbanks and a borough assembly campaign. And then in 2020, I ran the presidential primary here in Alaska, and then the Alaska State Democratic Convention, which was done by Zoom. And I managed a campaign in 2020 up in the interior, and I'm managing a campaign this year now. And I've gotten into a bunch of other political projects too.
Great. So, yeah, you've done a lot. I want to just really get right to the topic of tonight, which is volunteers. And I guess can you talk a little bit about the importance of volunteers in the political work that you've done?
Sure. Excuse me for this. This is the lingering COVID thing, and I apologize for that. Volunteers are the bread and butter of campaigns, and they're so important. And there were a couple notes that I made about volunteering and being engaged in general. And I'm going to tell you, these are the take-home lessons at the end of the talk, but I'm going to tell them to you now because it's a good thing to remember. The first one is that when you're doing political things, you should pick one thing and only one thing. Pick your candidate, pick your issue, whatever it is, whatever that effort is, pick that thing and do that 100%. It's really easy, and it's very seductive to want to say, gee, I want to work some on this campaign, and I want to work on this campaign. And I learned this when I was doing that recall, because what was happening was we were doing the recall, and at the same time, SB 21 was being considered for oil taxes. And I really wanted to jump into the oil tax thing because I have lots of ideas about that too. And I didn't. And I didn't because I knew that there were people working on the oil tax situation. And you really have to, when you're doing political stuff, you have to do your 100% and trust that everyone else is doing there 100%, because when you get distracted off of that, then you're not doing either cause or any of the causes the best. So pick your project, do your project, pick and stay with that project, and trust that everyone else is doing that too. And the second one is, this is the thing that you want to avoid. This is the cautionary tale. You don't want to wake up on November 9th and sit there lying in bed staring at the ceiling and think to yourself, if only I'd done this one thing, the outcome might have been different. So I'm saying those two things now because you should focus on what it is that you're working on, the thing that you're volunteering for, or maybe you're not volunteering, like I'm managing a campaign. Focus on that and do everything that you can, and don't leave anything on the field. Do 100% of it.
I know that you have 5 pages of notes. So if you want to sort of do your presentation,
sure. Okay.
We're here for it.
Okay. So Alaska is an amazing place. It's an amazing place to be involved in politics. The drama and the twists and turns. You could write a book about it. People have. It's amazing, but it is special in one particular way, and that is that there's probably no place that I can think of, certainly no place that I've ever lived or have been aware of, where an individual has so much influence on the outcome of what happens, and how much of that happens in Juneau, and how important what happens in Juneau is to the lives of everybody. So I wanted to talk a little bit about numbers. I don't want to get into numbers too much, but I wanted to point this out because it kind of points out why one person is so important. So I'm going to talk about House districts as for examples tonight, because they're the smallest unit that we're working with, but it's easy to scale them up. There's 40 House districts, and so each Senate district is 2 House districts. There's about 14,000 voters in a House district, give or take. Some are a little bigger, some are a little smaller. So 28,000 or so in a Senate district. Typically, to make the math easy, let's just say that the turnout of a typical election is 50%. Okay, so that means of the 14,000 voters, 7,000 are going to vote. So if 7,000 voters vote in the election, that means that if you swing 70 voters, you convince 70 people to vote for your candidate versus some other candidate, that amounts to a 1% change in the outcome of the election. And there's a big connection between the number of people who are working on a campaign and the number of people that you can reach and persuade. And that's just hugely important. And I think people don't realize that's how tight the numbers are. So for every volunteer, think of it this way: you get one person to swing one person every day between now and election day. That's 1%. 1% of the vote. That's a lot. It really is. So being a volunteer is really about engagement, because these numbers are so small. A candidate can knock on every door in a House district easily. Maybe a candidate who's a Senate candidate could knock on every door in his or her district. So you can reach the voters individually. And so that makes a big difference, is that engagement. There are some things that just have to be done. For example, if you're doing a literature drop or something like that, the literature has to go out. And if you don't have the volunteers to distribute the literature, that means the candidate's doing it. The campaign manager is doing it. The staff is doing it. And those are not good things, because particularly the candidate, if the candidate is dropping literature, it means the candidate is not making phone calls and raising money, and they're not engaging with the voters, except for the ones that they run into when they're dropping literature. And those are things that candidates can only do uniquely. Okay, if I'm a if I'm a campaign manager, I cannot say, "Hey, I'm the candidate, and I need you to make a donation to my campaign," because I'm not the candidate. I can't. I mean, I can go door to door and advocate for my candidate, but I can't be my candidate in those. And candidates really need to focus on those things. And so, what you need volunteers for is to do all of the other things that you can delegate out, that the campaign manager can organize a bunch of volunteers and get them to do those various things. Volunteers have these varying levels of comfort or discomfort about doing things. The one that comes to mind first for me is phone banking. I just do not like phone banking. I don't like it. I can do it. I will do it, but I don't like it. I worked on a big campaign, a national campaign recently, where I was a call manager, and I listened to the candidate making calls, and I'm taking notes while they're calling, and it is excruciating. It's just very, very difficult work. And of course, national campaigns are asking for big bucks in specific amounts. And it's just really hard to hear what you hear, but it's important. It's really, truly important work, and it has to be done. Some people hate lit drops, though my doctor says I should love lit drops, and I should do them every weekend, or at least 30 minutes a day, every day. And some people just don't like to volunteer at all. So I would say to that, to go along with what I said at the beginning, find the task that you're comfortable with and do that task, or transcend your dislike.
Is text banking useful? Because I get so many texts from campaigns that I end up ignoring them.
I was talking to a consultant the other day about text banking, and they told me something that I was a little bit surprised about. So you do text banking for different reasons, but text banking is the most effective way to reach people. Something like 98% of texts get opened. Now, it may be that you, Anna, don't respond to those texts, but something like 98% do get read. Which, if you think about it, that percentage rate of getting the message to a voter, even if they don't respond to it directly, is huge. I mean, there's no media that gets there at that level.
Well, I'll just push back a little bit and say that, yes, I read all my texts, but when I'm getting texts from random candidates in Ohio or Texas or South Carolina, I mean, I read it because it's in my text, but I mean, I don't respond to it.
Yeah, but you should. You know what you should do? Say stop. If you don't want to get them, say stop. Because what happens, they're paying for those texts.
Okay? I know. Well, you know what? And I think I'm probably not the only person on this call who's had this experience. I used to do stop a lot, but it didn't feel like they ever stopped.
Well,
so I just gave up.
If they're handling their data right, when you text stop, it takes you out of that universe.
I don't want to hijack your planned presentation, but I do want us to talk about social media and ways that volunteers can participate in social media. I don't know if you have some things you want to get to before we get there or not.
Well, we're right actually at that spot. There's a whole so far we've really talked about, for lack of a better word, brick and mortar volunteers. People are going to show up somewhere, or they're going to do some actual thing. They're going to go to a fundraiser. They're going to drop literature, whatever it is. But one of the things that's happened with COVID, and it's kind of one of the silver linings, is that we've become more comfortable with doing these virtual things. So doing a fundraiser, for example, a virtual fundraiser, is not. 2 years ago, we said, oh my gosh, how are we going to raise money? But it works now. And it takes half the amount of time. People can come from anywhere. It kind of opens up your donor pool. And we're more comfortable with it than we were, say, 2 years ago. And that's true about so many other things. So we've actually kind of learned to be online. And if you look around, if you go anywhere in public where you see people, they're doing this, right? They're looking at their phone. So that's the place. That is the place. That's where people are getting their news. That's where they're getting their information. It's where they're being persuaded, is in the media somewhere. There's so much that you can do with social media as a volunteer that it's really important. And that's really, when I first approached you asking about doing this talk, this is what I wanted to talk about. So a campaign, when a campaign is doing social media, they have, I'm going to use Facebook as the example, but the lesson trickles down to all of the various platforms. But Facebook is a really good example because the platform's quite mature and complicated and convoluted and has rules. So if you're a candidate and you have a Facebook page, you put out a Facebook post, and it sits there and it languishes, and you say, well, gee, how can I get more people to read my Facebook posts? Well, Facebook wants you to pay for that, and it's not that expensive really, but it is, you're paying for a result, and it's money. And like 6 or 7 years ago, a friend of mine, I'm a beekeeper, a friend of mine and I have a beekeeping business, and I did her social media stuff. And we found that instead of boosting posts, we would just create this network, this organic network of people who would follow her business. And we created this. It wasn't huge, but it was big enough. And we would boost a post and maybe get 200 people would see it. But we'd get thousands of people following it from the organic traffic. So I thought to myself, well, I was gaming the system, and now Facebook doesn't let you do it the way that we did it back then, but the rules still apply. So we don't really know what the algorithms are that we can guess, but we don't really know what the algorithms are and what makes Facebook or any other social media platform say, hey, let's bring this up. But we know that has to do with engagement. We know they like certain types of media, like video, better than pictures. They like pictures better than plain text. And so it points you in a certain direction. So one of the things that I've proposed that volunteers can do if they're sitting there, particularly if they're on social media, is pick one candidate, pick your group of candidates or issues, whatever it is that you want to support. Okay. Go find them on social media, like their pages. When you like their pages, you're going to start seeing their content. When you see their content, like their content, comment on their content, and then share that content. Because those three things, liking it, interacting with it by commenting, and sharing it with others, those things are building branches out to other people. And so if you pick your candidates and you do that, and everyone else picks their candidates and they do that, suddenly these webs are out there, but the webs overlap. Building that network of organic following really, 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 really helps. It helps everybody. So, and that's something that you can, if you don't want to make phone calls, you don't want the campaign manager calling you every 2 days saying, gee, we have this event, can you come do this? If you can do that, it helps. It really, really makes a difference. And honestly, it's not about the money that it costs to advertise, because digital advertising isn't that expensive.
Can you talk a little bit about the good thing about commenting on a post that you like? I'd heard this somewhere else. I'm hearing it from you again, that, if you really like a post, don't just like it, but write something, comment something, because by commenting, it's triggering the algorithm in a different way. Correct?
That's right. That's right. Because What Facebook wants, and all social media platforms want you to do, is they don't want you to just scroll, scroll, scroll. They want you to scroll and say, oh, look, I want to look at the comments. Read the comment, read the comment, read the comment. That guy's a genius. You're a genius. I never thought of that. Scroll, scroll, scroll. You're an idiot. Does your mother know you talk like that? Whatever it is. But that engagement is what they're looking for. So when people are talking and interacting about a post, that's the bread and butter. If you see something that you do not like, whether it's from a friend or from not so much of a friend, or the other side or whatever, don't touch it. Do not respond to it. Don't put your mouse or your finger near it in any way, because as soon as you do that, when you touch it, your interaction with that post, Facebook now knows, right? Facebook says, oh, look, somebody there who's on the other political side, because they know what your political leanings are, because they have tremendous amounts of data about you. Look, somebody from the other side is interacting with that post. Gee, that must be a good post. So now it's going up in popularity. Don't touch it. Don't ever, ever touch it. So, but some people can't do that. So here's two suggestions. The first suggestion is, if you feel compelled to comment about it, screenshot it. Don't touch it, screenshot it. Then post it and say, Paul Ryan's an idiot, and here's the proof. Okay? So that way, Facebook does not see you interacting with it. Sometimes, though, you'll get a post and you'll see some link to an article or something like that, and you don't like the person, but you want to read the article. Don't click on the article. Go to Google, search for the article. Okay? Do everything you can to not interact with stuff that you don't want to be made more popular, because it isn't about, gee, they agree or disagree. It's about engagement. It's about whether or not there's somebody actually interacting with that page.
Wigi, as we near the end, do you want to go over the two takeaways one more time?
Okay. The two takeaways are, pick your one thing and do it 100%. Just pick your candidate, pick your issue, whatever it is, pick it and stay with it and do it 100%. It's really hard this year because there's so many races and they're all important. Everyone says, oh, this is the most important election. Well, it always is the most important election, but it's so important. But pick the one thing and do it, and trust and believe that your friends and people who believe like you and who volunteer for campaigns are going to pick their one thing, and they're going to do that, and that's what they're going to stick with. And the other part of it is it's a cautionary tale. Don't let yourself on November 9th think to yourself, if only I had done, if only I had said yes to that phone bank, we would have made a difference, or whatever it happens to be. But I wanted to mention a couple other things. One of them is you can make a difference. There are examples of people everywhere making a difference. There are people in this chat who have made a difference, single individual people who have made a difference. And the one that I wanted to cite, actually, though, is not so much a political one, but do people know who Lenny Pacillo is or was? She's passed away. Do you know who Lenny Pacillo is? Lenny Pacillo and her sister took on the Anchorage Parking Authority, and they dressed up as fairies with tutus, and they went around downtown and they put money in parking meters, and they did it for years. And it got rid of the Anchorage Parking Authority. Unfortunately, now we have Easy Park, but it got rid of the Anchorage Parking Authority, and it changed the way that Anchorage enforced their parking. And now we have a parking garage right there downtown called the Lenny Pacillo Parking Garage. So she and her sister, two people, made a huge, huge difference in the quality of life in Alaska, because you go downtown, park your car, and you get a $100 ticket because, in her case, the registration sticker was on the wrong side of her plate. So she made a difference. You can make a difference. I've I learned that because I made a difference. The margins are slim. Volunteering is rewarding because if you wake up on the other side of the coin, if you wake up on November 9th and you say, you know what, my candidate got elected and I was a part of it, that's huge. You get to meet so many great people, and there's never been a greater need than right now. Really, truly, that's true.
Big thanks to Wigi Tozzi for being on the show. Thank you to Corey Coolidge for making this podcast listenable. Please check out his YouTube channel, Anchorage Life, and his website, anchoragelife.net, about life here in Anchorage. Gratitude to you, our listeners. If you like what you heard today, please subscribe, rate, and review us. Over the next few months, this podcast will engage in its actual namesake. We will become somewhat of an actual book club. At the end of September, we will be discussing A Land Gone Lonesome by Fairbanks-based author Dan O'Neill. This book explores the history of the Yukon River and the stories of its peoples. At the end of October, we will feature Dan's second book, The Last Giant of Beringia, investigating the theory of the land bridge linking Siberia to Alaska. And in December, we will talk with Dan O'Neill about his blockbuster magnum opus, The Firecracker Boys, which made him Alaska Historian of the Year in 1994. That book tells the story of the birth of the environmental movement led by a community of Inupiat in Northwest Alaska, who opposed the detonation of 6 hydrogen bombs on their land, which would have resulted in the nuclear devastation of our state. Get reading.